Mythic guilds are one of the most underrated ways to bring a brawler back into the meta. Even ones that people originally thought were bad have been seeing competitive use recently, with a prime example being the Mortis Mythic guild. Each one either opens up a new way to play the brawler or buffs a certain part of their kit, allowing them to compete with the increasing power creep in the game. I have always been a big fan of guilds and Brawl Stars, so whenever a brawler receives a new Mythic guild, I am always eager to try it out and see what new builds they open up for the brawler. But with only 10 of the 80 brawlers having them, they are completely overshadowed by the more prevalent buffs in the game, such as Star Powers, Guilds, and Hyperchargers. So for this new series, I'll be trying to give every brawler in the game a new Mythic guild concept. Yes, that does include a second one for those that already have them. For this video, I'll be focusing on our starting brawler Shelly and the 8 well brawlers in the game. But before I list off my concepts, I want to go over the criteria for a Mythic guild. First off, every Mythic guild is linked to a brawler's super. The only exception to this so far is Quo's, which works on both his main attack and super. I haven't always stayed true to this rule in my Mythic guild concepts, but for this series I will. Additionally, they all buff a specific stat on the super, whether it be range, speed, health, debuff effectiveness, or damage. So far there have only been 2 that have introduced brand new mechanics, with Sandy's giving his super damage reduction and Amber giving her super a slowing effect. Since the Brawl team has been hesitant to introduce new mechanics with the Mythic guilds, I will try my best to stick to that as well. And finally, I will not repeat any Mythic guild that's already in the game. I know Rosa would definitely benefit from having a 2-second longer super just like Leon, but Mythic guilds are all supposed to be unique to that brawler. So with all the requirements out of the way, let's move on to my first concept with Shelly's Supercharged guild. With this guild, Shelly Super will recharge her super 30% more effectively. For those who have kept track of Shelly's balance history, you would know one of her most recent nerfs was a 46% super recharge nerf that took away her ability to recharge her super with only 1 super and the ammo. This nerf was one of the main reasons that caused Shelly to go from a safe tank counter to a rarely seen counterpick in the meta. So I want to give this back to her at the cost of having to replace one of her best skills for it. As for why I went with 30 instead of just giving her back the 46, let's actually look at her supercharge and recharge. Currently, each bullet of her regular shot charges 10.05% of her super, with each of her shots having 5 bullets. So if you hit all of your shots, Shelly would charge her super in 2 shots. On the other hand, currently each shot of her super recharges 4.8384% of her super, with 9 bullets in her super. So if you hit every one, you would charge your super by 43.5456%. So when added in with a regular shot, we see it falls just short of 100% required to get her super back. But if I buff it and I gave back her 46%, we see it goes back up to 8.96. This is a problem, as if you hit your entire super, she would gain back 80.64% of her super, meaning with only 2 bullets from her regular shot, she could recharge her super if she landed her entire super. This is way too toxic, so instead I wanted the supercharge to come out to around 60%. That way Shelly would have to hit 4 out of 5 of the bullets to recharge it in 1 ammo. Overall, I feel this will make the guild useful but not completely oppressive, as it would still require a bit of positioning and skill to hit 4 of the 5 bullets after you use your super. But moving on, when it comes to the well brawlers, I'll be doing them in order of complexity, starting with the more simpler and straightforward guild ideas and ending with the ones that require a bit more to explain. Due to this, some of the simpler ones won't get as much in-depth explanation, as they would just be general buffs. But to start off, we will have Bull's Stampede Mythic guild. With this guild, Bull would deal an additional 25% damage with his super, which increases it from 1,920 to 2,400. Note that this would be the only guild to buff the super damage, as Quo's is associated with the poison afterwards, which also brings up the fact that I will be having to keep track of which guilds will have to claim each effect. So at the end of this video, I will actually have different categories for each guild and what unique buff they will each feel, with this one being the basic damage buff. As for what they will change, I decided to show the interactions in a similar way to what I did with Daryl. Since Bull has 5 bullets per ammo, I went over and made this chart for what interactions this would change if the balls got hit by his Mythic Gear Enhanced Super. What we see from this is that at their extremes, where you either hit almost no shots or the maximum amount of shots a lot of times, this changes almost nothing. But the key point that I see is when it comes to landing his super and false ammo perfectly. Before with Brawl, if you hit your super and then all 5 bullets from your ammo, you would deal 6,320 damage. This is actually a very big deal as he falls just short of 3 big damage breaking points of 6,400, 6,600, and 6,800. But with this skill, he would deal exactly 6,800 instead, allowing him to super and then one-shot these 16 brawlers in the game, which is 20% of the roster that he would previously have to waste an additional ammo on even with perfect play. This skill I feel overall is still balanced out by the fact that it is attached to his slow super, which means he would struggle to consistently get value out of it. So even though it is definitely useful, I think it would be one of the weaker gears of the ones I will be proposing in this video. Moving on to the next one, we have Rosa's Divine Protection gear. With this skill, Rosa's super would shield an additional 5% damage, raising it from 70% to 75%. This might seem like a small buff, as Rosa's super is only 3 seconds, and a 5% buff doesn't sound that useful. But when looking at the shielding, we see Rosa's regular super will give her 33,333 health during her super, while on the other hand, this Mythic Gear Enhanced one will give her an effective 40,000 HP. Basically 6.6k more HP during your super, only if you are at full HP though, and for those 3 seconds. This one would be balanced out again by the fact that the super doesn't last as long, and it has diminishing returns the lower HP Rosa is, as even at half HP, it will buff her HP effectiveness from 16.6k HP to only 20k, which again is half effectiveness and only 3.3k a bonus for those 3 seconds. Overall, I see this only being useful when she is fighting a lot of her counters, that way she has a fighting chance against them with her super, which I feel is a good way to do Rosa's super, as it is definitely one of the more risky ones to try and buff. But now moving on to our final simple one, we have Primo's Meteor Drop Mythic Gear. The radius of Primo's super is increased by 1 tile. Again, a fairly simple gear in design, but against groups of enemies, it could allow him to cycle and aim his super a lot easier. Just like Rosa's, the usefulness of this gear will entirely depend on the situation, but it will definitely be an improvement to his capabilities, especially when facing brawlers that want to group together, like Jean and Buster. Now getting into the more complex of the Mythic Gears, we will have Nita's Spirit Linked Gear. When it comes to spawners and the Mythic Gears, I wanted to make them something that promoted their unique ways of play. Oftentimes, Nita will follow behind Bruce using him as a shield, so I wanted the Mythic Gear to reinforce that. As for the buff, we already have ways in the game to buff Bruce's speed, survivability, damage, and attack speed alone. So I wanted to go with something that would boost both him and Nita. So the effect of this is that while Nita and Bruce are within 5 tiles of each other, both will deal 12% more damage. This boosts Nita's damage from 1,920 to 2,150.4, or just 2,150 when rounded down. On the other hand, this boosts Bruce's damage from 800 to 896, or if he has the pet gear as well, it will boost it from 1,000 to 1,120. Again, this one is a bit more complex as it requires Nita to be following behind Bruce, but I feel it is still simple enough in design to understand. As for the changes with this, the following graph will show all interaction changes for just Nita, as Bruce would be too variable to calculate. I see this gear being kind of usable, as it is the middle ground between the pet gear and the damage gear. As with the damage gear, you only get to buff Nita, and with the pet gear, you only get to buff Bruce. This one allows both of them to be buffed for less flexibility and smaller individual buffs. Moving on, we have the Colt Mythic Gear. For his, I wanted to play more into his role as the Star Park main attraction, and his subtle build designed around reload with both his speed loader gadget and access to the reload gear. So for to push this, we have the Crowd Pleaser gear. Impressed by his accuracy, Colt's fans give him more ammo to shoot. How this will work in game is that for every bullet of his super that he hits onto an opponent, Colt will reload 0.2 ammo. This means if he lands all 12 bullets of his super onto an opponent, he would reload 2.4 ammo. And since his bullets do pierce, In the case that he can land his super on multiple enemies, he could fully reload his ammo bars. So there is a risk reward characteristic with this skill, as the best Colts would be able to have almost infinite ammo with this skill, while the bad ones will essentially have a useless skill slot. Moving on to the last of the more complex skills, we have Brock's Mythic skill. For Brock, we rarely see his personality trait of being a trash-talking gamer shown in his kit, so I wanted to stress that with this skill, being the one that punishes opponents for bad gameplay. The Noob Stomper Mythic skill makes it to where his super deals 20 more damage with every rocket fired. This works slightly different based on whether he is using his regular or hypercharged super. For his regular one, it's exactly as you would expect, with the first rocket doing the standard 2080 damage, the one after that doing 2100, and so on until all 9 rockets are fired, with the 9th rocket dealing 2240 damage. Overall, it is a minimal damage buff, but one that would make players who get hit by later rockets punished for not escaping the super. Where this skill really shines though is with his hypercharged super. Brock's hypercharged is often seen as one of the weaker ones in the game due to its minimal damage, but that changes with this skill. Brock's hypercharge fires off 5 waves of 7 rockets, and each one is affected by the Mythic skill. So what we would see is that with each wave, the damage will increase by 140. So every rocket on the first wave would deal the standard 500 damage. Every one on the second one would deal 640. The third would be 780, the fourth 920, and finally the last wave would deal 1060 damage per rocket. It is still just about half the damage of his regular shot, but with the increased hypercharge radius, it will feel much more menacing than just the pillow shots we have now. It does, however, still have its drawbacks, as just like with Colt, he would have to be giving up one of his best skills to equip it. And since it gets its best value from his hypercharge, it will only have maximum value once or twice per game. But now we finally get to the 2 brawlers who Mythic skills will be introducing new effects to the supers, just like Sandy and Amber's. First off, we have Barley's Refreshing skill. Barley's super now also heals himself and allies who walk over it by 10% of their HP per second. This healing amount is the exact same as Kit's, but for Barley to get it, he has to have this skill equipped, and him and his teammates have to walk over the super. It also will only get its best amount of healing when Barley is paired with tankier teammates. So overall, this skill will get its best use when played in control-based modes where you and your teammates want to push in over the area Barley controls with his super, and when paired with tankier teammates who can get the big healing numbers from the skill. Overall, I still feel this skill will be powerful though. But now on to the final skill for this video. Finally, we have Poco's Mythic skill, Fortissimo. Teammates hit by Poco's super will get a 15% speed buff for 3 seconds. This skill is actually a reference to Gale's old star power, but unlike Gale, Poco actually wants to use his super on teammates. This overall just adds more versatility to Poco, but just like his Capo star power, he will not receive any buffs from this skill himself, meaning it will have no usefulness in solo situations. But with all the gifts out of the way, we can now look at what roles each one would fit. As for the basic mechanics, we now see that there are 9 brawlers who have them. Jean will have the range buff, Leon the duration, Mortis the speed of the super, Shelly super recharge, Primo super radius, Bull damage, Rosa shield effectiveness, Spike slow effectiveness, and finally Quo poison effectiveness. Moving on to the spawn mechanics, we see that Eve deals with the amount of spawners, Pam deals with the spawned healing, Nita personal and spawner damage, and finally Tick spawner HP. Swapping over to specialized abilities, we only have 2, with Colt's being skill based reload and Block being ramping damage. But finally, we also have brawlers who introduce new abilities with their mythic skills, with Amber introducing a slow, Sandy's introducing damage reduction, Barley's introducing a heal, and finally Poco's introducing a speed buff. But that's about all I have for this video. But let me know which ones you think will be too strong or weak in the game down in the comments below. It will help me a lot with balancing concepts in the future. But if you did enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe and like for more. Thank you for watching.